Jig, you know what's funny? I'm watching people shake hands and stuff, and I'm squirming.
I don't shake hands anymore. I do the bump.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys get that? Oh, mute your phone too.
Yep, it's already muted.
Hey, it's Ann. Can you hear me?
I hear you, Ann. Do you hear us?
I do. Now I do.
I
Now
think
it's
you're going to be
granted.
good then, because they heard us before. I think they're muted.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, awesome. We should be fine. Where do you live, Ann?
I'm in New York
Oh,
this
you are.
week. Yeah, I'm back and forth. I leave to LA tomorrow.
Is Ann on? You guys got Ann? Yeah, check.
Yep, I'm here. Can you see me?
Sure, whatever you want. I'm at Ray Levier. Yeah, I'm at Ray Levier's studio, so we're working and taking a break to come on board. Ray is ready to go, man. Amen. No, we finished this. I'm just holding that up. Sure, no problem. I'm a massive fan of the hundreds, especially for me, and I like them so much that when I did the Shark Week piece, which I just recorded with the Budapest Symphony, I had the Sony flew over the hundreds so that they could sit behind the conductor, and I would say a huge portion of my mix of the entirety of the whole thing is just the hundreds because they sound that good. And what I like about the hundreds is the capsule, the secondary capsule on top, which goes up upwards of 50K. And we know 50K, whatever that is, but I hear clear resolution. I'm telling you right now. And then on that piece for the drums, Omar Hakim actually did the drums. And I took the hundreds to Omar's and we put them on overheads like that. And then the 80s on his toms. And it took no more than a few seconds of playback. And he's like, I need these. So, yeah, they're go-tos. And Ray and I work in St. John in the Caribbean in the spring quite a bit, recording and stuff. And we take the Sonys with us, right, Ray?
That's right.
Yeah. So and the headphones, I mean, I can mix in those headphones upwards. I think I can get upwards of 90% of my mix done with absolute clarity in those magical headphones. So I speak from authority just to say they are the real deal, both the 80s, hundreds, and the headphones. No, they're monstrous, and like I said with Omar, we just put the 80s on the big toms, and they can take a pounding. I also use the 80s on guitar cabinets, and they can take massive, massive level, and they're big and creamy. They're like a Royer meets a 57. I hate to use those typical words, but they really are in one microphone. It's a big cream bomb, and they're just they're just wicked. There's no other word for it. Hmm.
And is such a powerhouse. And like, your hands are in so many pies. I don't know if that's a proper thing to say, but like, you do so much stuff in the industry. Besides, and we want to talk about sort of label and distribution and your attempts to bring the communities together. But you want to, have you used these microphones? Have you used any of the new the Sony re-releases and new releases of these mics? Do you want to your talk as a producer and engineer? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I just started to use them. As you know, I sit in the global business office at Sony for the last 5 years with Rob Stringer. So we have this global studio initiative, Michael, that you've attended some of our global studio meetups on the lot in Culver City. We went from 5 studios to over 40 studios. So now my goal is in designing these studios, which I've had a hand in designing a lot of them, their flagship locations and or consulting, is to get these products in all of the facilities. Why? Because Sony has their hands in developing so many different things, and it's like we have to connect the dots, right? Why isn't Sony Electronics really
Amen.
speaking to all the studio initiative? What better way to get some of the bigger artists that are coming through the studios using the product, even down to the headphones, even down to the microphones, even down to the sound bars, in the lounges. So that's my job in terms of not only running the studios, but because of my technical background as an engineer, for those that know me, I worked for Alicia Keys for the past 25 years, and she's under Sony. So I understand the whole label, album coordination, technology, how are we strategizing. Michael, as you know, we've done a big thing with Sony 360 over the past 5 years and helped develop not only develop the tech, but dive into the mixes. But yes, I'm using the cardioids right now, the cardioid on the C100s. I would love to get the Omnis. I would love to get the 80s in my own hands. It's a very sometimes slow process in getting the product to the studios, but we are really globally now focusing on getting these microphones in our studio, and it's amazing how great they sound. I have 3 C800s. They,
Wow.
they use we're their flagship in my own facility. I own Jungle City Studios, but I have to say the C80s and C100s, they really can stand up if you're working at home. If you don't have the ability to be traveling with a C800, it's an amazing you know, microphone to get your hands on. So, I think that they're very versatile as well, which is really critical.
At the last event, by the way, and thanks for putting those on. I think, and an honor to work with you on all the Alicia stuff and developing, as we had done, like developing the best practices and the techniques. They weren't around at the time, and trying to figure this out,
Correct.
and having your guidance go through and knowing how to get distribution out and knowing how the label was working and all behind not just the technical and the artistic side, but the behind the scenes stuff has been, I think, invaluable in getting the recognition and the direct to consumer, like having people hear the work and the effort that's put into it
Exactly.
and leading the example. And so the other is that bringing folks together. I love that you talked about the creativity aspect of it. Richard, I was going to ask you, and Will, you guys were both talking about earlier about the creativity side of things. How do you find, or are you using the top end of the microphone, speaking of the double capsule and up to the 50K, are you using them in any kind of creative way to, like, let's say video games or movies or something, where you can manipulate those high frequencies down into hearable ranges and finding cool, interesting uses? Let's start there, and then I have another follow-up creative question for you.
Go ahead, Richard. Go ahead.
Richard?
Okay. I have a good example of how I use that. As so even though I recorded the whole orchestra on the Shark Week thing, I'm a hybrid guy, so I want more is more. Everything is more. It has to, maximize impact. So I went to Clubhouse Studios in Rhinebeck, and I took this C100, and I had my favorite cellist who lives up there, who has a cello from 1713 in Paris. And I had her put 3 layers of rosin on the bow, and I mic'd about that far from the thing with the C100. So you got this screeching, like almost right out of the Psycho soundtrack. And I layered that in. And even though I had like 60 channels of orchestra, that one channel of cello was equally as powerful as the entire 60 channels because of the C100 and the fact that I basically hyper mic'd, I call it, with it. I was just getting creative with it. It's such an incredible tool.
Oh, awesome! That's a cool technique. Anybody, take that and run with it. Have some fun. We were talking about the creativity. So one of the things that's really important is exploring and taking creativity, but then being able to give feedback to the people making the tools. And so that's something we were talking about earlier about one of the things that you're very happy and proud about is working with Sony is being able to have the feedback and give them feedback, and they want to listen and hear about it. You want to?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's been a really amazing experience getting to even just give feedback and engaging with the team at Sony. You know, it's really not a one-way street of them making products and saying, this is what we have, use it. They're always like curious as to how you use it. Everyone makes music differently. Everyone mics things a little bit differently. And that's part of like the fun part of engineering and producing, is pushing those boundaries, breaking things. But when you get to report it back to the people that are making the products,
Right, brother?
that really kind of makes something more than just something that's engineered by somebody who doesn't step in the studio realm or create music. And I think that's how we get to really interesting places with that stuff.
Well, you know, it takes somebody. We can break things all day long, and that's kind of our goal, is to find creative sounds out of broken things, you know, or just pushing the boundaries. But if nobody listens, you know,
Yeah.
the tree fell and, you know, nobody heard it or something.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you know, for me, I used the 800 for years, dragged it across the country multiple times. It's obviously a wonderful flagship mic. And a couple months ago, got some loaners from Sony and brought it back to the studio and did a lot of experimenting, a lot of shooting out with old classics versus these newer, you know, C100, C80s. And even versus the 800.
Yeah, what'd you think between the? If you want to talk about the relationship between, like, sonically.
Yeah, I mean the 80 is like such a good complement to that 800 sound, without having to drag out the power supply and this $20,000 mic.
You know, I'm gonna say I learned something about them at the last event when we were sitting there looking at all the microphones and we were on the Sony lot. I wasn't aware of the 800, that you had to be just above parallel. I thought, you know, parallel was good, but it actually performs better when it's, you know, it's got room for the gas to go up and keep it cool. And that was an aspect of it I didn't know, but that's something you got to pay attention to, and you don't with the 100.
Yeah, and the 80.
Well,
is
yeah,
like,
the heat sink, right?
The heat sink, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah, it's true. That has to be even.
Yeah, or up, but it can't be down.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I
you'll
used
fry the
C100.
microphone.
I used that microphone, the 800, years ago. So I started using that with Al Di Meola in the 90s. Like, it's such an incredible microphone on nylon guitars. So my ear is tuned to that microphone. And I feel, for me, I know a lot of people say the 80, but I keep saying the 100 is the one it's a very modern, it gets the best of both worlds, because it's like, I think I was sharing with you that since I have a television production, I just do TV tracks, really. That's all I do now. And I have one microphone up in my room, one, and it's a 100. It's 100. It just sits there. I record the cymbals, I record the shakers, I record the guitars, everything. It just moves around. One microphone, and I retired my other ones, and the 100 does all those jobs.
It's like a desert island mic. That's
Yeah, for
awesome.
me it is now. It really is. That's why I take it with me down to the desert islands, right? And we literally carry it with us.
Perfect. Perfect. Hey, do you guys, let's talk about, you mentioned traveling and being able to listen, so I'm going to pivot from mics for a minute, but let's talk about VME, and let's talk about the mixing and on the fly in different spots. And Cameron, you've been doing the same. I kind of want to hand you the mic. By the way, this is conversational, so we want to be able to just, if you guys have a question or anybody wants to ask a question, ask. If you guys want to say something, say something. We're kicking this off and just going to have some fun. So, but let's talk about listening on the road and creativity and perception.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I was introduced to the Sony ecosystem and VME and all the headphones and everything about last year, and I went in and we did all of these measurements. It was, I mean, it was crazy. I had microphones in my ears, and just learning the process and what they were doing and how the technology was being created, and seeing that, you know, they're creating a place where creatives, people who are on the go, or just anyone can create at any place, any expense, any time. So that was important for me and very vital, because like I travel back and forth from the east to west like constantly, like a psycho, you know. And so when I had that experience, you know, I was with Hero, and we're like, all right, here we're gonna sit here, we're gonna listen to, you know, some of these tones. You're gonna put the headphones on, take them off, and you know, I'm going back and forth, and I'm just like, whoa. I kind of freaked out the first time. And, you know, that right there, being, especially in the immersive mixing space, you know, the access and being able to actually be inside of an immersive room, you know, it's getting better, but it's not that easy, you know. especially when you're just in a fast-paced industry. So doing stuff like that, you identify the localization, and I've never had an experience like that before with from a headphone perspective. So it made me extremely confident about mixing on headphones and sending deliverables and knowing what it's gonna be like, what that end game could be like. And it gets the job done faster. You get more work, you get more money, everything's great. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well, more confidence too, because you know what you're doing.
for sure,
Yeah, the
for
confidence
sure.
is huge.
Yeah, and I think it's convenient for professionals and all the pro audio guys, and it's also accessible just for like the end users and like general creators or people that are just trying things out. I think that's what's important. Like it's within arm's reach. You don't have to go to a big facility. You don't have to go and sign up or be signed to a label. This stuff is right here, and you can just experiment. So Sony's always been for the creative, and that's why I believe just in all of their technology and all of their products because they think about us first.
That's awesome.
True.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just think back Sony with the Walkman, right? That personal, portable, all that stuff. It's just like it comes back to that for a lot of the work that I do, it's all about accessibility, right? So I do a lot of work in quad, so it's less speakers, and that's accessible. You can do that in a bedroom, right? And so the headphones, I've been using the new headphones, what's it, MV1s?
VME.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
There you go, right there.
V1. There it is.
Perfect timing. Thank you for putting that up. And they're so light. They sound good.
Yeah,
You can use them all day. You can do the mix. And the reality is a lot of people listen to music on headphones, and so you need to know what they're listening to. It matters.
I'll say that when the first time I heard it, and I was like, localization is tough. 2-channel playback is tough. It's going to change. We're learning how the brain perceives. We're understanding sound transmission and decoding and all of this kind of stuff. But I'll say that as many times as I've been doing this for a long time, surround since 2001, and I got into immersive in 2016, and listened to a lot of stuff. This is the first time I heard localization this way. This is not so hard. We evolved to hear this way, so we don't get eaten. This, is weird and tough, and that's hard. And that was the first time I heard that. I was like, holy crap! Those floor speakers I thought were on, and they weren't. I'm fortunate enough that my room, I've got I got a 916 set up and a Sony set up, and so with that, I've had my ears mapped, whatever, and being able to even come to a show and know I've got to listen to something or know that I've got a reference if I'm out somewhere, that I got to be able to hear something and know that I can count on it. It's been awesome traveling, being able to know that I've got an audition device that I can make good decisions on.
Yeah, having
And I
that
think
portability and reliability is important.
Ann, do you want to talk? Ann, will you? You were about to say something, but I don't want to interrupt. But
I
I
was
was going to
going
ask
to
you.
say, like, a big shout out to the VME team, right?
Oh,
that
yeah.
have been going to all the studios and making a huge effort to, recreate these virtual mixing, environments, in the acoustic field for our rooms, right? And to do all the ear stuff, measuring the ears, right? Michael, we're doing it right on the lot at Sony as well, as you've been there, but big shout out to the team who I've seen everywhere from, Battery Studios in New York to Skywalker when we visited in November. So there's a lot of effort being put in, and that's what I appreciate from Sony in the effort to constantly develop the tech that's and partner, and being agnostic in the overall grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I love the shout out. Thanks for that, because the team, I would say, and they're floating around. You guys, anybody on screen can't see that they're all floating around over here and back over here, but they have been tremendously receptive to feedback. They want feedback.
Correct.
They're going to different studios and mapping Blackbird and Battery and and Skywalker and Apple and every place that they can go to map the rooms and get actual feedback. They want to hear feedback, and that's the symbiotic relationship that we started talking about in the first place, is having a company that understands that there's more than one aspect of the music business. You're talking about capturing, you've got to distribute, you've got to reference, you've got to and Ann, you've been super engaged on the label side. So as far as like you were talking about with Alicia and knowing what the business side of things are, do you well, I was going to head that direction, but actually, sorry, I'm going to pull back for a moment and go with the referencing side. Having had my ears mapped in different rooms over the years, I know you have too. Do you carry that around as references when you're working in different places? I know you're always on the move. Do you have a particular favorite? Do you listen to a couple of different rooms when you're auditioning something? Do you change the profiles? Do you stick with one?
I change the profiles, right? I try to get used to some of the rooms that I know that I've been in, right? I use the Sony room as an example. Like I've measured my ears in the Jimmy Stewart building, and then I switched to a couple of different rooms. I've tried the battery one as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing. I'm about to do my jungle room. I haven't even had it measured yet due to my own traveling, as you know, Michael.
You're always
So
on the go.
yeah, so again, yeah, like I obviously am working in headphones all the time. You know that even in the tracking process, right? Like Alicia's recording everywhere all the time on
Right.
many different things. We could be working on a Broadway play one day, and my next thing is we're doing this Broadway cast album with 16 musicians, and I'm going to really dive into the tracking in immersive. So I'd like to bring George in, me and George
Awesome.
Massenberg, and dive into using some of these microphones and really testing it. Michael, you know, we've dove into 360 audio. We've had the biggest of deals with 360 audio to launch, right? You know, our mixes in 360 audio, which was a huge success. But again, we dealt with the twists and turns of the architect software, right? Before it was walk mix, right? Like we started in one format and ended in another. But the thing is, we recreated and reimagined the mixes from scratch, Michael, as you know, painstakingly. We didn't use stems. We went back to the raw files, and we were one of the first to unveil this with a partnership with Amazon. And you know, Alicia's into the tech, and I think getting the artists involved is really key if we want to promote the technology. So she did a special one-off partnership with Sony
Cool.
and has, you know, stood behind doing lots of content, Michael, as you know, lots of, you know, promotion. We were the first to unveil the 360 partnership on Amazon. Was it in 2021, was it? We was it 2021, right?
Yeah, or 20
We
was it? Or
21, I
kind of
think.
21. I kind of lost track of a couple of years
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
You know?
But we mixed this music, which was over 250 songs and 7 albums, and
Crazy.
it's
That's a
really
lot.
important that we're not just taking the less is more approach, where you see a lot of these younger mixers are just, you know, using stems with reverb on it. They're panning a few things, and they're calling that their 360 audio mix or their Atmos
That
mix.
needs
It's
to
not.
end. Kill it
Yeah,
all.
it
Kill
does.
all those shitty mixes.
It does. You have engineers now like thinking less of spatial because that is what is setting the bar, and that's
Listen
we have
to
to
all
get
the featured tracks on Apple. 90% of those mixes are those dumb mixes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
They're so bad.
Well, you know what this is, and what's one of the talking
No,
Michael,
no more up mixing, please.
no up mixing.
Yes.
Start from the beginning. Start from the beginning.
I'm gonna add no more stems.
Yeah, stems suck.
Stems with a circle and a thing through it. The stems are made for, I mean, you know, soapboxy, whatever. I mean, we all know this. The stems are made for the stereo. They're not made for the immersive. But you know, but they were also looking at. I mean, my excitement is moving forward, or the things that we can do moving
Correct.
forward, rather than you know, it's great to reimagine and it's great to go, but doing the best practices with the reimagining is starting from the original sounds, and then how
Correct.
can we do something with this rather than starting with something. You know, I guess if you were going to relate it to food, you don't go to a restaurant, buy a meal, and then maybe try to turn it into something else.
That's the most annoying thing when someone tries to do that at a
I
restaurant.
know, right?
Right?
You got to bring your
I
own
think the
stove,
Wild
your own
West-
pots and pans, spatulas and stuff. You know,
The
But-
Wild West was when they decided they were gonna remix all of the old legacy content across every label in, you know, 360 and spatial. Like when we do that, there's a business side to that where, you know, you got to create the budget. There needs to be mastering engineers. We had to. That's what we did when we mixed
One of
all
the
of our
only.
albums, right? Like remix them all. But the label is going off hiring any mixer that's mixing for them, not going to the original mixer and producer, or, you know, finding the budget to make it work on some of our favorite records. Like I don't want to hear Fleetwood Mac Rumors mixed by someone else. You know, I don't want to hear Pink Floyd. Like I want to hear the real, who mixed it, who is the producer, and the budgets have to be right on the business side. And until then, there's going to be a big gap.
Just move on, new stuff.
New stuff.
Like,
Well,
don't waste your time on the old stuff.
right.
Amen.
It's an emotional moment.
That's how
It is
I
a
feel
moment.
too.
It's done.
That's
It's
how
done.
I feel too, because now the stereo people who are mixing the stereo mix are also doing the immersive mix, and that's when you can get, that's when you can reimagine your mix, right? Like it's becoming easier. It's just now that you have to invest the time in the spatial audio or the 360 audio mix equally, I think that's key.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
well, going into legacy stuff, because I'm actually one of the engineers that work in the legacy catalog label, um, and there's a big gap just between community and communication when it does come to that. And when I do work on stuff, I always partner like with the A&Rs and with the A&Rs whoever's running the estate, the management, because even if you can't get the original mixer, at least you get the tastemakers and the people who are part of it to kind of make sure that you're going in the
Yep.
right pathway. Because legacy stuff is ridiculously hard to work on. I mean, it's the most delicate music. You're talking about decades and decades of iconic music. Still to this day, that's 80% of the industry. So I've learned coming in really early in doing this that partnering with the labels and getting to, even if it's the managers or whoever the producers were, it's vital. And I think that should be like a standard, 100%.
Absolutely.
And it'll improve quality control, and it'll improve just the awareness around immersive audio, because we don't want to lead people into the wrong direction. They hearing these upmixes and these weird songs, and they're just like, what is this? This is the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Or worse. So yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree.
getting the artist involved. I'm beyond the labels, but having the artist have something into it, because I mean, there's been tons of records I would say that I've worked on that by the time the artist hears it, assuming that that's happening, because sometimes catalog stuff you don't get a chance to. I know with Alicia, I know there was a Peter Frampton record I did with Chuck Ainley, and until Peter heard it, he was like, something's missing. This isn't supposed to be here. Or George Strait, we did a record and it was like, that guitar part that's always on this side isn't there, or that, those things. And so it's their record to begin with. They have to be part of the creativity. And and Richard, I want to bring you into this conversation too, with the creativity side of things, but not having notes, or, we were years and years of not knowing what's going on. And all of a sudden you have a sound that was on the fly. You're very creative and you go, plug this, plug that. Oh, that's cool. Print that. Let's move on. And you don't necessarily, but when it comes to trying to go back and recreate that, it's really helpful to talk to the person that did it in the first place if you can, because then you can get to the right sound.
Like, to be honest, it's really like almost impossible to recreate that stuff, right? Like you have to kind of live with and hope that they live with the opportunity for things to be different. But I find, like I said, I've worked in a room with like Aerosmith and Steven Tyler, and he didn't really understand or know what was going on, right? He comes into the room, he sees everything, we play the music back, and he's like, okay, what just happened, right? We break everything down and we open up the session, and we had a guitar, and he's like, solo this guitar. And he's like, wow, I never heard the attack on this guitar like this. Can we do something with this? Can we move it? Then he's on the board. All of us are on the board and automating stuff. And then by then, because he's involved, he's like, okay, I'm reimagining what Janie's Got a Gun can be. This is a new experience. And just from that kind of like hands-on involvement, it opens their minds. And then you have direct access to making the record what it should be, collaboratively with the original artist and yourself. And then it's the end of the game. He wanted to get so involved in immersive audio because of that. He wanted to buy the studio. He wanted everything, but it was such an inspiring thing to see, like such a legacy and historical artist like that wanting to just and be involved in the future of music. But like I said, it's a lot of respect, due diligence, and just understanding how things work, so.
And having that involvement and that engagement means, I mean, that's ultimately it's best for the fans, because then the fans are able to connect with something that already has an emotional connection, and it's done in a way with respect that was originally done.
Reimagining, I think, is the key word, right? Like, if you're not going to reimagine it, let it be, because you're just going to ruin it,
Yep. Sometimes they could just say, no, hey, we want this in stereo, and that's it, and that should be fine.
And it's okay. It's okay to leave it like that if you want. Hey, Richard, you want to talk about speaking of creativity and stuff moving forward? I mean, what do you find with aspects of, because you're always tracking new stuff because of the shows you're doing and because of all the cues and the speed at which you need to work. You want to talk a little bit about creativity and things moving forward rather than looking back?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of what's tomorrow and what we're learning from today, and how we can go immersive, and how we can take this and take that and push forward and give customers or consumers 360 fast. I came from the world of surround. I was in it for a long time, so I'm highly aware of it.
Right, right.
And but now I want to move on. I think 360 is effing killer. Excuse my French. It really is. So, for example, I mean, I'm talking about the Shark Week thing a lot because it's just what I was currently working on. And part of the reason that I had those Sonys was that I could have layers of depth to a multi-channel mix, even though it's a television queue. I don't care because it has. Now we have upwards of 8 room and microphones. This is not fake. This is the real deal. This is the real depth. I think someone's mic's
Hang
feedback.
on a second.
It's the Zoom.
Uh,
It's the Zoom, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah,
aliens in the building.
I move very, very fast. Ray, we move lightning speed fast in TV land. Uh, but for example, something that I did with Omar's drums on the Shark Week thing is I ran them through the Neve at the clubhouse, and we put some hundreds up about 15 feet from the. We ran them into the live room and put some hundreds up, re-recorded them, and then we put them about 30 feet back, and it created 3 layers of depth from one stereo track. And that's just an example of what you can do to integrate. If you are stuck with a certain sound, you can make it bigger in real life by reamping, for example. That's just an example of something, but I go back to the days of the Sony S777, which was my favorite. I'm a convolution guy all the way. And so what I'm doing is I'm using the hundreds to create real depth. It's that simple.
Well, if they didn't have the detail or ability to capture, speed, transients, detail, and frequency response like that, you would just be really capturing it. But it actually gives you something more to work with, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I carry the hundreds are my goat. I carry them with me now. Those are my mics, and I mean it. That's not BS. I have lots of microphones, but those are the ones I use now.
That's amazing. Anything you guys want to talk about? Talk about? Let's. What do you?
I would like
what
to
are you
ask Ann
experimenting
something.
with?
Can I ask Ann something?
You absolutely can ask Ann something.
Ann, can you talk where 360 is going?
That's a good question, right, Michael? I think we're knee into dealing with the 360 folks every day. I think it is a little bit of a mystery. I love to, on the, how can we get more involved in like making, like a better mix is having multi-channel plugins and the ability to do so. But I don't know that I have a update right now on 360 audio. Michael, I'll toss it over to you. Do we have any? I know they've been really focused on the VME stuff.
Well,
right.
I know they've been focused on the VME stuff. The one thing, and I don't know if I can say it, but
And
I'm
the phones,
gonna.
yeah.
Unless I get a shoe at the side of my head, so everybody watch out. But there's they've got a new conversion tool. So one way to try to be able to get content out a little bit more and make sure there's plenty of content, as for example, Tidal or Amazon, playing 360 files is the Atmos to 360 converter, which I think does a fantastic job of keeping objects. June, can I talk about this? Can I talk about it?
Can we say,
okay,
yeah.
Just making sure.
June's there? Okay, June's there. Okay.
All right, then we can talk about it. It's a fantastic tool that it's, we've had to find ways to get to, as a mastering engineer, I've got to deliver everything possible. Like I have to deliver LP masters and CD masters and high-res downloads and, and Blu-ray, et cetera, and cassette masters, whatever these days. And we'll come back to another conversation. But, it's the same kind of thing. Is like the best thing an artist can do is get their music out there in the way that people want to listen to it. And regardless of the format, you need to make sure that the integrity of it is as high as possible, no matter which way it gets released or which way it started life before it ends up being out there. And I think that tool is a fantastic tool to be able to keep the benefits of objects in Atmos and the bed and the LFE and the differences between the two formats to keep them as honest and pure to the mix as possible. And so, Richard, to your question, I see also, I see that there's a tremendous opportunity for like cross-pollination to get it out there. We know that people listen a majority in headphones these days. Both formats work and have a different presentation, but both work very well in headphones. I say both, Oro 3D, we can't forget about that, and we can't forget about what's on the horizon. And as we're talking talking about, what's next and developing,
And I
where
think,
we may get to.
Michael, like, we probably can't say much, but we had a meetup, Richard, with the PlayStation folks, and myself, George Massenberg, Neil from, was it Naughty Dog?
Naughty Dogs, yeah. And then Eric Schilling.
Eric Schilling, all of us are out of our Sony Global meetup. We have some things that we're trying to work, that it's too early to say what they are, right, Michael?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's pretty exciting that Sony wants to sit down with us and help develop, tools that will make, working across all these platforms easier, right? So
Right.
more or less, if you could read between the lines.
And I'll say, I absolutely, again, big credit back to you for putting these events together, because that conversation probably would not have happened the way it did, and the benefits that may come from that without putting together the different aspects of Sony music in the same area to talk to each other. Again, that's why we're doing this, is to be able to talk about how many things are going on that are interconnected with from the creativity to the distribution and in between. So.
I was just going to say the workflow thing is key. I mean,
Yeah.
all of this immersive stuff is complicated to begin with. No matter what your workflow is, from start to finish, and getting to that point where people are starting immersive, it's all about workflow. So you can start there, be there, and then translate it to all the different formats or different ways of being. If you like just being on headphones, be on headphones. If you want 200 speakers in your room, cool, but like you got to get the workflow stuff figured out, and Sony's been very good about that.
Yeah.
And we had some meetings with like PlayStation, and we all have the same common goals. It's like, hey, let's meet together, figure out how we can work. The gaming has a lot of things figured out in terms of chips, right? Like, hey, let's get together. What can we, and I'm really excited for what we're developing with Mike, George, and Sony and the guys at PlayStation, to just all have meetings and pull everyone together across all these departments to invest. They want to continue to develop and grow their products, their technology, which is exciting, right? Like, so, there'll be more to come. And Richard, like if you want to have some side convos with me and Michael, we can.
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I noticed, Michael and I talked about this. I noticed an incredible, because I've been around Sony long enough, thanks to Andy Muniz, to see the cross pollination that the technical side, the engineers at Sony Sony's way more interested in audio now than I've seen them be in a long time, and I'm thankful
Absolutely.
because those headphones kick ass. I'm just going to say that right now. And take that as an example. Take their microphones and see how it's all integrating together. And thanks to Ann for making the 360 type thing. It's so exciting where we can go. And we learned from Surround 5.1 what doesn't work. So let's apply what doesn't work and then not make that mistake again.
Yeah, and like again, we're doing this whole music studio initiative, and even how we can get each studio involved as being a launching pad for the microphones, the technology.
Right.
Obviously, the audio is in every one of these facilities, and that's a tool for the artists that come in. So
Agreed.
my goal is to like connect the dots.
Yeah.
PlayStation, Sony Electronics, Pro Audio in Japan. Whoever it is, there's all these different departments. As Michael met when we had this global meetup, and we plan to do one bigger. It was a sets convention in LA that they put together, and we piggybacked off it and had a global studio meetup, invited all the studio managers from all of our locations around the world. We have studios in England, Germany, Italy, Milan. Everyone came together, and we realized Japan came. We realized we're more powerful together. We saw some products, Michael, in that, which was interesting. The mic simulation software, right?
Right.
The new version of the headphones that were in the lounge that they had set up, right? With the so I think there's a lot to come, and they're developing and spending the money and developing the product across the board, so.
Yeah, the confluence of it, something you guys talked about, and then I know you got something to add, is that, but I think of note is that where music is going and everything that we're doing is so, the lines are blurred. Something that's going to be used in music, in a music-only release, may be used in a film, may be used in a video game, it may be used in different ways, and so all of those different disciplines, for lack of a better word, need to talk to each other to know how to optimize and get the best out of all these different worlds. But the creativity to capture the sounds, the mixing, the perspective, perspective, all of that is, is not necessarily related to a format so much. And it's nice to see that all these companies or all these interconnected groups are talking to each other because they realize finally that there's a whole lot of commonality and common goals.
And our next goal is to get the artists involved, get the artists involved more in pushing the product. That's why Alicia did a big content deal for 360 Audio, and a big deal where they budgeted for shoots and things like that. I think if you have the artists behind this stuff, it's really important because they're the connection to the consumer. The more the consumer can buy sound bars and headphones, what did we say? We have over 10 billion people right now around the world with Sony headphones. So we have the opportunity there. It's just that we have to connect the dots more and get the artists involved more, in the marketing and promotion, And I get Alicia involved in every tech aspect. Michael knows that, from every platform, every DSP, and I'm one of her digital strategists. And, it's just getting these artists involved and helping them learn, because there's a learning curve. Alicia's a producer, a writer, arranger, a player, loves tech programs. We got to get all the artists, involved, and they will, support the product, especially when an album is coming out. You always want visibility. You always want to be on the face of something. And I think that strategy wise, I'm going
to do this. It's actually an creative opportunity.
Totally.
Definitely. I think a lot of artists are always looking at pushing the envelope and creating something completely new, and aren't even aware of what the limitations are and how these boundaries have moved, because it's come from a very technical place and kind of spread out from there. The awareness is spreading about immersive and the possibilities, but I think everyone working together on it is what's going to make it really create
absolutely
the
right.
next new thing. And it's it feels like many people are doing it incredible, and for me personally, maybe it just feels like just scratching the surface of the possibilities of what this could be with the right collaborations and the right things. And kind of zooming out about Sony technology, I think something that's really cool is all these products work really well together, and they create these really amazing ways of creating music, but you can still use products that you're comfortable with. You don't have to use MV1 headphones with VME. You can choose your own adventure, and choose what you're comfortable with, which I think translates really well to getting artists on board, because they can listen to however they're comfortable. They can record with whatever mics they're comfortable with and still use the greater other parts of the ecosystem altogether. So it's not like you're locked into only using one thing to get the job done.
Right. Absolutely. You guys,
Even to add to that, Sony's morals and just for the creator, and one thing about them is just they allow you to be yourself, right? I work predominantly in the Dolby Atmos space, and it was never a time when they were trying to gear me away from that. In fact, they have products that I use to help influence what I do in the Atmos space as well. So again, the ecosystem of their technology and the electronics, it works with everything. It's not just for Sony 360. It's not. You have VME. VME can be pretty much migrated with anything. And that's what's important. It's once you make a product, and that product it becomes a lifestyle. It becomes culture. Then it's just like an everyday thing, like the iPhone. We need the iPhone for our bank accounts, Uber, and all of that stuff. So we're heading in that direction where music and technology is in parallel, and it's gonna be just like that. So.
One of the I think a key thing is in parallel and parallel processing.
Yes.
Create the technology.
Parallel compression.
Yeah, there you go. Just don't say multiband. That's not my favorite. Some people like it. I don't. Anyway, that's a whole other soapbox. Well, as a turn, yeah. Well, we meant to be tangent ranch here, freeform, right? So, yeah, okay. No, but it has to be in parallel, because if the technology drives the creativity, then what's the creativity but a subservient to the technology? Same kind of thing. It has to be hand in hand and a back and forth. That's always the best case scenario for everybody.
I dealt with it when I was at Interscope with the 5.1 stuff. It was the only way any of that stuff was surviving was people the tech companies paying for it. None of the artists were engaged. No one really gave, it was such a big lift to just start, right? From the creation process to the listening process. Now it's so easy. You just put on some headphones and you can go.
Cool. Well, Sony has Digital Business Group that handles all those partnerships, and they were the first ones because of their artists. When Dolby did a deal with Apple, they were the first ones to strike a deal so their artists can obviously participate in all of the you know Apple visibility, the Apple, when you go to the Apple landing page, the playlist. So Sony's very agnostic in making sure they're competitive and that their artists are represented across all the formats and DSPs collectively. So
Back to because we got about 5 minutes left. I want to go back to the creative side for a moment and mic placement. And you guys, so all of y'all, all y'all, I guess from the South, I suppose it's the plural. Is the changing of miking techniques, thinking about immersive audio and thinking about frequency responsive microphones and all of those kinds of things. You guys want to talk a little bit about any ways that you've changed your capture techniques, the things that you've done to be able to get sounds, no matter whether known spaces or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, going back to the 3D printing, the more you can kind of figure out ahead of time what you're going to do, it just makes the setup like so easy. Yeah. It really does. And I mean, it's not easy because you're doing a lot of work beforehand, but it's something that I noticed too was, we had this idea at the Creative Immersive Experience of recording a jazz band around, how it used to be done around one microphone, and we wanted to do a circle around immersive array, which I think worked really well, but all of a sudden all these questions come up of where's the front, and is there a front anymore?
Is there a front?
Yeah, and it's just like there's so much to explore in that space that for me it's just like I just have to experience it, and it's like I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this. It's like I feel like you could talk about it for hours and hours, but it's just up to the individual to get in there and try new things, and it's a wide open space, so there's just so many amazing possibilities to do.
Well, thinking about the idea, like you were saying about putting somebody around, it's like what Morten Lindbergh does, like put the orchestra around, find a good environment. First, find a good environment that sounds good, that augments.
Amen.
It's something that's supposed to help augment the music, right? The environment. It's not, in this kind of, it's not unlike music in the Middle Ages where it was written for a church, and the key is because and the timing is the delay of the room, and the key is because that's the resonance of the play. Like, paying attention to environment to be able to capture and be part of the creativity. Thinking about what Morten is doing with like mics around. But I also think about things, and Richard, I was going to ask, if you're doing anything like this. Like, I think about even capturing sounds like, let's say a guitar amp. You've got a guitar amp, and here's the speaker. We're kind of common about sticking the Royer and the 57 like straight up in the cone, but if you pull it back a couple of feet or a foot or two or something, now we've got waveform development. And there's like thinking ahead to know that that's not going to be on the front line in an immersive mix. That distance actually gives waveform development, and it already sounds like it's back a little bit. And the mixing then kind of helps take care of itself because you're paying attention to the tracking. How are you imagining this in the first place? Well, let's capture it that way.
Yeah.
When I cut the big heavy guitar parts for the Shark Week thing, it was at the clubhouse. Again, I keep saying that, but that's where I record. And we put layers of microphones for just the guitar. So a single guitar pass is going to have 6 channels, including real depth. So if you got the depth, use it. Put the hundreds up and stick them 20 feet away and screw it. And
the rule, 1 foot is 1 millisecond, right?
Right.
Latency.
And
that's how I measure.
Smash the hundreds. I can smash them. The 176 I was saying is my favorite compressor ever, and I maul the 176 into those Sonys, and they can take every ounce of it, and it still sounds creamy and good. So, like, you're taking high definition microphones, going old school with the 176, and it's the best of both worlds with real depth and real distance.
Right, and you don't have to manufacture it after the fact. You've already created.
No, it's the real deal.
Right.
Not that manufacture doesn't sound good. And this is just a small detail. Like, it all adds. Anne has to sell it all, basically. So, but we got to make the good stuff to begin with, right? It's that simple.
And that's the next thing I think in recording for people like myself who sit with a band a lot is to play with the microphones, right? I always have a lot of room mics, but now to be specific, do I want 5 or 6 mics on my piano? Yes. Am I going to go for some of the Audio Technica, some of the new Newman stuff that are specializing in these microphones? Yes, but just even if you could put two mics on the piano, you might be limited. Even if you could record in quad, you're in a studio and you have left, right, in front, put 2 speakers in the back, left, back, right, back. Start in a simple way where you can add some mics on your piano, you know, that are extra and create the depth and the room, you know. I mic my piano.
Microphone.
It's like even doing quads for an overhead for drums.
Yeah,
Like don't put
yeah,
two,
and
do,
for
you know,
myself
four
with
or
the
something.
piano, I mic
Quad
the
is the
holes.
way. Quad is
Yeah.
the way.
I'll mic the holes. I'll do mid side over middle
Right.
C.
Why not?
I'll mic the pedal underneath. I sampled the piano with Native Instruments. It's the biggest piano plugin for the past 14 years.
Love it.
Alicia's piano, but it's like dive into also the different ways you can record the chamber, the hammers, and you can use all of that, Michael, as you know, in like when we record. And you know, it's like, okay, just make a group and a playlist, and when you make a playlist, you're punching in on 6 tracks at once. We get it. Artists want to be quick, but there's ways to still be quick and nifty even though you have multiple tracks in record, you know. So I know with vocals it's harder, but sometimes I'll have 2 mics. I'll have one microphone up high in Omni because Alicia's volume when she records, and Roberta Flack did this a lot, obviously. I took this idea from someone else, but I have a close mic and a mic in Omni about sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 feet away, you know, and just play with it if you have time, if the artist is receptive to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the Heroes David Bowie stories of being at Hansa Studios and, you know, having the mic way far away that's triggered with a gate, that when he was by the last chorus, it's on, and it's like, that's it for immersive. You know, it's like those are the ways we need to be thinking outside the box and creating these spatial experiences naturally in the performance through these miking techniques.
Well, hopefully that also means, you know, back to paying attention to the room and knowing that, you know, you know your space. If you're going to capture the space, that it's actually something that's going to be augmentative to the you know, the primary mic or the, you know, certainly the song.
Definitely.
And I love mono room mics. I'm the first one to throw a mono room mic up right between the kick and the snare, and then all these different, and then everyone is, you know, I have a different mic pre, whether I have a V76 or a 2254 on one config on my M49, or I have a small condenser, whatever it is, it's all tone and EQ, and it adds to the depth of what you know, sometimes I use that mic as a basis to build my whole kit around it. I'm putting one of those mono room mics up because Alicia loves old Motown, and I have a lot of those steps that I listen to.
Exactly.
So it's like I'll put that mono room up and then build the rest of my individual mics around that mono room, you know. So
awesome. Well, we're gonna have to wrap this up in a second. Anybody want to add something to as we wrap this up?
Just to add about the mics and miking. I'm from the world where, you know, I'm predominantly like recording like you know, electronic stuff from the computer, not so much in the live perspective. But now being in the immersive space, it actually opened my mind to actually start learning about those miking techniques and how to record, you know, and kind of like emulate what you think you want that to sound in the immersive space. So right there, you know, that having that in that ecosystem and immersive audio, it opened the opportunity to actually dive deeper and more into just music itself. Now I want to create music in a totally different way, you know, and it was never like that for me before. I just needed a vocal booth. I got the, you know, I make the beat, go on FL Studio or Ableton, lock it in, and we're done. And we print the stems, and that's it. But now we're like, we want to record, like we want to create that array of just like 360 and all of this stuff. So it's really cool and it's really inspiring, and I think it's gonna change just and revolutionize music.
Awesome.
I reamp some of my electronic sounds. We collect drum libraries all day and we sample all the time. Alicia's live drums over program drums, but I reamp a lot. I take a lot of those drum sounds and I reamp them in my room, and I'm placing mics. You know, I have a bunch of really cool reamp boxes. I have a smart reamp box that SSL gave me, but any reamp box where you can take your line level and bring it back down to mic level and then use your mics and the positions in the room. I use a sub kick. I reamp and put a sub kick on my bass. There's so much fun stuff you could do to reverse a lot of, you know, electronically using sample sounds to be a hybrid. So I'm glad you brought that up because you just, you know, reminded me.
Awesome. You get the different layers.
I love Jungle City, by the way. It's one of my favorite studios of all time.
Thanks so
the Louis
much.
Vuitton room.
Badass.
When you're in there next, we'll have to meet up. When you're in there next, hit me up.
And Michael, Andy has my mixes out there on his head in his setup
I was just
for
about
the
thank you.
Shark Week stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I was about to say, Andy came up and say if anybody wants to hear the Shark Week stuff that Richard did, Andy's got it over here on one of the.
And just Omar's drums with the hundreds are there isolated as well. So I mean, you can't go wrong. You
That's
just
awesome.
can't go wrong.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great because anybody can hear them one off. Any follow up? Any?
I think the net is the hundreds are the most popular thing.
I think
Yeah. Get the hundreds.
Amen. Yep.
Hey, can I get 100? I need. All right, yeah, we'll come back to it.
I want 100 plus 700.
I gotta try it.
Hundreds.
Yeah. Now you got me curious. I'm gonna have to dig in. Yeah. Anything you want to talk about? Any wrap up stuff? Any thoughts, comments? We have to let the next panel come up here in a minute, but yeah. Well, hey, you know what? There's going to be stuff. I don't know if you guys have seen the board, but there's a whole bunch of conversations that taken some of these things we've talked about and gone a deeper dive throughout the rest. We tried to start with an overview and just talk about a whole sort of creative ecosphere bit, but there's going to be a little more detailed conversations throughout the rest of the. This is a weekend? Weekend, yeah, right. This is a weekend. Maybe lose days sometime, right? You know, we're used to being in a sunshineless place, you know, dark basement somewhere. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Ann, Richard, thank you very much. ROC.am,
Great seeing you.
KamranV, Will, Chason, everybody, you guys, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you guys.
Take care. Good seeing everyone.
Over and out.
Talk to you soon.